order, I believe. And we will do the pledge and the prayer. Mr. Moore, if you don't mind,
If I don't mind, what?
doing the prayer and the pledge.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll do the pledge first. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the opportunities you continue to shower onto this community. Help us be good stewards of these opportunities and to represent well the interests of this community. In your name we pray, amen.
Okay, our next item is approval of the minutes from September 19th, 2022 special meeting. I believe you have a copy of those. You've read them. If we can get a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Darla, if you will do the roll, please.
Sorrell,
Yes.
Dirk,
Yes.
Moore,
Here. Oh, yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes. Okay, are there any petitions from the audience?
I know of none.
There are none. We will move to the next item. Discuss, possibly recommend council action regarding approval of the 2023 EDTA meeting schedule.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Darla, if you would do the roll.
Dirk,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Sorrell.
Yes.
Okay, our next item is report from the Chamber of Commerce, and it does not look like that Barbara is in attendance, so we will move on to a report from Main Street.
Hey guys, so my report is super short because the main topic is the next item. But just really quick, we had a visit from National Main Street and State Main Street. This was last week. They kind of heard about things that we have going on, programming that we have. So they came and did a visit, and they were able to discuss with us just how we stand and just different things that we've been doing lately as far as just economic development downtown and things that have kind of gotten national attention from them. So that was something super neat. But that's all I'm going to report on if we want to go to the next thing. Yeah.
Okay, any questions for her? Not, we will move on to the next item, which is discuss, possibly recommend council action regarding approval of the memorandum of understanding with Pryor Main Street. And there is a copy of that in your packet. And there are comments from Mr. Ritchie. Is there anything at the very end of it?
Yeah. Jenny, have you had an opportunity to review them?
Yep. I just had a couple questions about
She
it.
advanced.
Yeah. But I didn't know if they wanted to read it first. And then, yeah. And then whenever you guys are ready, I can bring up my questions.
Well, I think, personally, I think we probably just need to have some discussion and questions, because as you
Yeah.
said, if we're reading it,
Yeah.
and I think most of it are reading it for the first time.
Yes.
So I'll be honest with you, me individually, I mean, I appreciate everything you're doing, and we want to help everywhere we can. I'm going to have more time to digest this.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure it's even between the right parties, and digest it in compliance with the actual language of the bond proposal. Because I have some questions there too that have to be resolved. And I know Mr. Ritchie's looked at it, I've looked at it. I'm not so sure we don't have to have an auditor look at it maybe, and maybe bond counsel. Because we've got to make sure we're using the funds as voted on by the people.
Right.
And I'm not quite there yet.
Right. My questions pertaining it after seeing it, so Kim drafted this, and one thing that I just wanted to note was that it mentions grants to be written to the EDTA, and I think maybe that should be changed to the city of Pryor. That was my main concern with this, and then the rest whatever questions you have, for me or, and if I have any further ones, I've seen it pretty recently too, so.
So I think my first question for you and Mayor and Mr. Ritchie are, is the EDTA the right entity for this to be in agreement with? And should it be the city?
Should be with the EDTA.
Okay.
Which is something we'll have to decide. I mean, I'm not quite surely I'm convinced on that. So I think that's an issue that has to be resolved. Like I said, we were just given this. And I think I have to have time, maybe nobody else does, but has to have time to examine this and make sure it's being handled properly, and make sure these monies are being handled properly in accordance with the proposal voted on by the people. Because
So-
it's rather kind of restricting language that was in that bond proposal.
Right.
Is there a timeline that this has to be approved, or,
Not necessarily, I mean,
so it
obviously.
ain't gonna hurt you guys if we take it out for another month to
Yeah,
review this?
I mean, the sooner we can get it, the more programming we could do, and,
Right.
obvious things like that, but there's not anything that we're like, we need that
Okay.
for, yeah.
Can you remind us what Main Street's fiscal year is? Because we would want to start it hopefully by the beginning of your fiscal year, right? When is that?
So we go based off same as the cities.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's the June to June, yeah.
Thank you.
So, Mayor, this may be a question for you, but how would the accounting for that occur? How would we ensure that the funds, once transferred to Main Street, were only used for an approved purpose?
We would set up accounts for revenues, also accounts for expenditures, the same way that, and that would be consistent with the entries in our operating system that we use. So it would be consistent in reporting, be consistent in, according to the terms of good accounting principles. They would be audited annually, along with the rest of the city's annual monies. Also, if there were any questions could go to our city accountant or to our city attorney. I think it is a good idea, Fred, that we have bond counsel take a look at it.
Yeah, I just do, because, and if we had a greater understanding of how, I mean, again, I'm not trying to deny you anything, y'all are, going in the right direction, appreciate the hard work. I think, this is just my own editorial comment, I think a lot of hard work and underpaid, which unfortunately is sometimes what you see in governments and things you're doing. So this is nothing against you. But, yeah, to have bond counsel and to have an understanding exactly how you would utilize these monies, not in general terms, but in specific terms. Because the bond proposal talks about the purpose of the money is to create new jobs and retain existing jobs in the Main Street corridor. I know we all have a definition of what the Main Street corridor is. There's nothing in here defining that, but that's just the purpose. And it says by, paying the cost incidental to and/or debt service on obligations issued to assist in the establishment of business and/or commercial facilities. Business facilities and/or commercial facilities is what the proposal, what was voted on. That's what it says. I'm not sure I know what that means. I know what facilities means to me, but I've also looked, and there's some other definitions. So I think we would need to have specifically how Main Street would be using this to see if it complies, and then discussions with the auditor and the accountant and bond counsel to have their opinion, because that just protects everybody in here, that they agree that those monies are being properly used in accordance with this proposal voted on by the people.
Right. My comment to that, yes, because I want to make sure it's completely transparent. At the last EDTA meeting, we were able to do a presentation, and I was able to give kind of background in how Main Street encompasses what the verbiage is on that Fund 68. So if you want me to get that with you too, I can get that to you. It might be in the agenda packet from last meeting, but I think it might answer some questions that you just mentioned.
And unfortunately, Well, maybe fortunately for you all, and fortunately for me, I was out of state. But I think those are the kind of things that need to be specifically incorporated in any type of agreement. So it's spelled out specifically how those monies are going to be used, and then have the opinion of the bond counsel, the auditor, the accountant, that yes, that use completely complies with what was voted on by the people.
So, Kim, based on what you've written here in your comments and what Fred has said, it would almost appear that instead of this being a 5,000 per month that is transferred to Main Street, it would almost need to be retained in those accounts until receipts are provided that can prove that those expenditures were within the language of the bond. Is that correct?
I think you could do it in advance. Yeah, I mean, I looked at the ballot language pretty hard. I looked at the ordinance that was enacted after the vote was had pretty hard. And I tried to tailor this to make sure
Okay.
that we were in compliance with all of it. And one of my comments had to do with accounting. And I think it's a great idea to have bond counsel take a look at it and the auditors take a look at it. I think that's a great idea. But, you know, a couple of my comments, number 6, was that accounting is critical for this tax money. And that the funds sent to the EDTA by the council need to be segregated, which you can do that without putting them in different accounts. It's just bookkeeping, okay? But any of that tax money for the Main Street corridor needs to basically have a separate ledger for it that comes from the city to the EDTA, because the EDTA's purpose is much broader. The EDTA can deal with industrial, retail, residential for the entire Pryor community. So we need to have a way of tracking the Fund 68 monies that comes from the city to the EDTA, so that the EDTA knows that that money can only be spent in the Main Street corridor. But then monies that come from the general revenues of the city, you can use them for any of those broad purposes. Then also funds coming from the EDTA, and let me back up, you asked who the proper entity is. I mean, Main Street could contract with either the city or the EDTA. In my mind, it makes more sense to have it coming through the EDTA for various reasons, but
My only concern would be, and I'm not disagreeing that the EDTA could not be a party to this, but I think the city would potentially have to be involved too, because I think they're the ones that ultimately have control of the funds.
and that
They're the
comes
ones that
in
have
with
to
an
approve the
agreement
transfer
or
to the
or a
EDTA.
condition from the council on the monies that comes to the EDTA. So
So
that's how that's handled, is at that level, is what I envision, Fred.
I understand. I just, you know, it kind of like, they're the ones that control the purse strings. I think it might be a good idea if they were also signing off on this, just to understand what we're going to be doing with this.
Yeah, and what I envisioned was a separate agreement, if you will, or designation between the city and the EDTA having to do with this,
Okay.
okay?
It may be just as easy to have everybody sign the same thing. But again, too, it's going to be done, I think, on what auditors say and what bond counsel says too. And that's why I think it would be extremely, and I apologize if I haven't seen that. You know, you may have given great detail and you're very precise, so you probably did, but somehow that needs to be incorporated in this too, so when an auditor or a bond counsel looks at it, they know specifically what that money will be used for, to see if it then complies with the language and what was voted on.
Insofar as the grant writing comment that you had, you know, what I was seeing was grants that the EDTA would apply for. And I would think that if the city were gonna utilize you for any grant writing, that would be a separate as-needed situation. But it could be incorporated too, so.
And again, we get down to maybe something that is specific, if it's grant writing, okay, is it grant writing that is specifically limited to paying the cost incidental to and/or debt service on obligations issued to assist in the establishment of business and/or commercial facilities, business and/or commercial facilities. I mean, 'cause you can, you can write grants for many different purposes.
Right.
And to your question further on accounting, Main Street's gonna have to do that same thing. They're gonna have to have ledgers on money that they receive and how much of that is Fund 68 money and how much of it is not. And they're gonna have to be able to provide the documentation of where those monies are spent.
And that's where I said I wondered if it would be easier if it was, you brought the documentation in and then it was reimbursed in some manner.
Well, I think you could kind of look at this as MUB, or you could look at it as street department, because street department gets tax money, MUB gets tax money. We get audited every year. We do an internal audit initially, and then we do an external audit that we provide to the mayor for him to provide with his audit. So, I mean, like, we're getting hit twice, making sure we're using the funds where they're supposed to be used. So I don't think we want to be that person to goes through all their spending, because I don't want to micromanage them. That's on them. I got enough to deal with downstairs. Sorry. I'm not going to, that's their position. But that's kind of how I feel that it's kind of like us. They're kind of like MUB. If they're using tax money, they got to be able to audit. They're going to have an internal audit and probably have to do an external audit. I mean, that's the way I would
Okay.
see it.
Well, of course, the ones that are gonna get dinged,
Would be the city.
it's gonna be the city.
Right,
Or the
so-
trusts, it's not gonna be
Right.
them.
Right.
Now, I agree, I don't wanna, create too
No.
much, I mean, good grief, we have an accounting nightmare. But I do think we do something specifically how you would be spending it, and then you would keep records yourself that we would, because the auditor would wanna see those at some point in time. And we, you could do monthly reports, we could at least see them. I don't know that I necessarily need to have you turn in, just me personally speaking, turn in those receipts to get the money, because I can see this trying to create some kind of flow for you.
Right.
But we just need to make sure it's flowing all in this direction that was voted on.
My only question with presenting specifics for the upcoming year previous to receiving the funds is a lot of our mission and a lot of what we do comes as an as-needed basis. So if we have a building owner that's now ready and they're ready for facade grants, but we have already allocated previously that we don't have that type of money, but the next year when it rolls around, they're not ready, there's a lot of hands tied that might happen, whereas similar to hotel motel, we throughout the year do what we need as it comes, and then we report at the end, and they get to choose if they fund for the next year.
And I'm envisioning that working here.
Mhm.
If this includes everything, and it includes specifically how you're gonna spend the money,
Mhm.
and you're gonna do it for things like that, that to me sounds like going to promote business and
Right.
commercial facilities, and you would have that money ahead of time, and as long as you're doing that, well, then you're gonna keep a receipt. I mean, I think that all comes out. So I can vision if we can get this into a form, that you could have the money there to be, so you wouldn't have to wait. And
Yeah, right. And
I think the concept that you guys came up with will work. The percentage I don't think works. But I think the concept of Main Street receiving a certain amount of funding each month through the EDTA, which comes from the city, I think that works. Whatever we do, I'm 100% with Jared. Follow the KISS principle. Keep it simple. It doesn't need to be super complicated. But one of the questions I had, and one of my comments was that I haven't seen like the articles for the formation of the Main Street, and I haven't seen the bylaws. And I don't know, do you know offhand, are your operations restricted to the downtown area? Or can you do projects apart from Main Street?
we're downtown corridor focused,
I thought that's probably what it was.
Yeah.
I thought that's probably how it had to qualify for the Main Street program.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, then all of your activities are restricted to Main Street, which is our Main Street corridor, which gives me more comfort in being able to utilize those funds even for, payment of staff at your facility.
Where do you take that? Who defines that downtown corridor for Main Street? Does your board define it?
Yes, and this was something that before my time, they defined it as Elliott to 69, and then Southeast First to Northeast First, in between those areas. So that's where it's defined, and that's something we have to submit to state. And I believe it's in our bylaws. It's been a while since I've looked at them, but
And we need to have that information too, because unfortunately too, that was not contained and set out specifically. It just said to maintain new jobs, create new jobs, and retain existing jobs in the Main Street corridor of the city.
So are you okay with that,
Whatever
Kim,
that
if
is.
it's defined by their board, what that is? Or do we need to put
Is
some
it in the
definite,
documents though?
that I sent at the presentation, or
Yeah.
your bylaws?
I don't remember if they're in there or not. They're definitely in minutes. Places, but-
Find your
Yeah.
articles of organization and find your bylaws,
Mhm.
get those to me. And then we may need to have the board take some action, we may not, depending on what those documents say.
Okay.
And then, again, specifically how you'd be spending the money, because, you know, again, paying them for wages or not too, I'm not so sure that complies with this. That's why I want bond counsel and auditor to look at that.
I just want to make a quick comment about how the funds will be spent, thinking about most, if not all, of your grant writing will be to contribute to the streetscape. And in my eyes, that's straight up commercial facilities. And so I just want to make that comment to the public, that it may not be tied to a specific, you know, receipts, but it's the service of the grant writing that's going to directly benefit the downtown corridor in the facilities, so.
And I agree, but it needs to be restricted to those type of grants.
Right,
And we
okay.
need to have somebody
Make
put a
that
stamp
clear.
of approval on that ahead of time. Because if you don't, if you just say grants.
Right.
And you've got that over here, and you've got these grants over here that don't apply to that, or there's potentially an argument, or we don't have bond counsel or an auditor saying that ahead of time, well, then the next thing you got popping up is a taxpayer suit,
Right, I
which
see.
we don't want to deal with.
I hear you.
So I think you've done a lot of good work, and I appreciate Mr. Ritchie drafting this, but I think we need to table it to get bond counsel and the accountant's opinion.
So
And then
moved.
how do we want to handle, how do we want
One
to?
question before we wrap this up. Mayor, do they, when they're going for grants, do they go with the city Sam's account? Or
Yes,
Sam's number that we have to go through?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So the TSEP grant, the TAP grant, that'll have a city signature on it.
So would that be an issue if we go with EDTA or if we just say it's to the city? Because, I mean, the EDTA is not getting the grant, it's actually the city of Pryor.
I don't think that'd be an issue.
You know what, you see
because
where I'm going with that?
The sole beneficiary of the EDTA is the city of Pryor. So I don't think that's a big issue.
Okay.
So how do we want to handle any other questions? Do we want to send those
Well,
to,
it seems to me we need a little more fine tuning on this MOU.
but I'm sure there's others that have some questions. Do we want to send those questions to Darla to facilitate getting to Mr. Ritchie, or?
That's the efficient way to do it.
So let's do that. If anybody has any questions, please send them to Darla, and then Darla will facilitate getting them to Mr. Ritchie. If you have any specific questions before we come back and look at this with bond counsel and the
You already
accountants.
heard my specific questions, I hope, so, and my concerns.
And I can do the bond counsel and work
Okay.
them through that whole
But I
process.
do think you need to get some specifics so those can be incorporated into this, so they can look at that and see specifically how you would be spending that money to see if it then complies with what we're talking about in the language of the proposal that was voted on.
And we'll work with you on that before the next
Okay.
next one. So I think we have a motion to table. We have a second?
I'll second that.
Do we need to set a deadline on those questions so that we can get them back to Kim and get them back to the council for the next meeting?
I think that'd be a good
Black
idea.
Friday.
And if it's anything additional, I think we've expressed a lot of what the concern is, and I think Mr. Ritchie would have an understanding of that. So it's just if there's anything additional.
So November 1st, would that be reasonable? That'd be
2 weeks.
2 weeks from now, and then almost 2 weeks until the next meeting.
Plenty of time.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion second. Ms. Darla, if you will do the roll.
Williams,
Yes.
Durr,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Silver.
Yes.
So I'm just clarifying to make sure that I don't leave here missing anything. I'm going to basically take the presentation and all the documents from last time, plus the bylaws, get them with Kim, get them with you guys, and then, from my understanding, take it legally however you guys need to do
Yeah.
it, because,
It was just that idea, like I said, and I apologize, I wasn't
That's
here,
okay.
I was
Yeah.
out of state. There may be more wonderful information in there, but just make sure we have that, make sure Adam has that. So we can just kind of
okay.
put more focus in this about specifically how you spend the money.
So my part is getting you guys that, and then you guys
Yes.
working out
Okay.
your legal stuff.
Jenny, all I need from you is a copy of your articles and a copy of your
Okay.
bylaws.
Okay. All
And,
right.
and if those bylaws, I'm assuming you would want a copy of the minutes where they define the downtown corridor if it wasn't in the
That would
bylaws.
be helpful.
Great.
Okay, we'll find those.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for all you do.
Now that Barbara has joined us again, if we can go back to number 5 for a report from the Chamber of Commerce, please.
Much of what we've been doing lately is tourism types of development. One thing I'd like to mention is we've been working with the liquor stores in town.
How
on the
close?
on the proposition that's going to be on the ballot. And we're going to be doing some, just bits of education. We didn't want to start it too early. But the deal is, this thing it doesn't matter whether you drink or don't drink, believe in drinking or don't believe in drinking. That's really not what this is about. That's all been taken care of ahead of now. Our liquor stores are selling exactly the same product that Walmart sells, Walgreens, Homeland, and all of the convenience stores. And it's almost, we're looking at it like a shop local type thing, because our liquor stores are very locally owned. And they're not selling anything except the hard liquor, but basically they're selling exactly what everybody else is selling, and they can't open on Monday or on Sunday. So it becomes a very unfair economic issue. And so we usually don't get involved in politics at the chamber, but we thought this one is not about politics, and it's not about anything other than just fair business practices. So we're working with them, and you'll be seeing some advertising and just information, basically, that we're putting out. And you know, the Halloween's coming up and Christmas parades are coming up. One exciting new element is I received a phone call from, some of you may know the Hibbards. They're the people that put the big 110-foot cross up between here and Adair. And they've been married for 46 years, and she's been collecting nativity scenes that entire time. They have over 400 nativity scenes. So they called and wanted to know if we would be interested in working with them to do a pop-up for the Christmas season. And I said, absolutely, that's a really good thing. So I called around town and drove the streets to see what was empty in the downtown area. And we found a couple of places. We found a good store, and it's on Adair Street, right in the center of everything, next to Red River Loans. It's across the street from Western Auto. And it's owned by Craig Stanley. So I looked, and it was on the door, and I called Craig, and he wants to work with us. And so it's on its way. And so hopefully the first week in November in Pryor, we will have a pop-up nativity museum, which we're excited about because it's very, very, very promotable to get people into our town to shop for the Christmas season.
Cool.
And this is not the right city group to talk with, but I am assuming I'll talk with someone that, because it's a store that's ready to move into, I assume, with everything, and it's commercially zoned already, that there'll be very little red tape and things with the city to get it open.
We'll just go through those processes of code and all that, so they need to come up and talk to Cheryl Lau,
Okay.
our deputy clerk, and make sure all those bases are covered.
Okay. And they're gonna leave it open until the first week in January, so
Cool.
I'm very excited about it.
Very good.
And that's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's exciting, thank you.
Okay, our next item is a review of the financial report. Mayor?
I don't have anything in writing for you today. We do have the total of the two $50,000 contributions that have been approved coming into EDTA from the city's general fund, the one from last fiscal year and the one from this fiscal year, plus the $34,000 that was in the account, plus the interest that has accumulated. That's a total of $134,142.21. That was at the closing of August, and there has been no transactions since then.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mayor on that?
We've approved grants to who at this point in time? So,
To softball and soccer.
okay, and the other two were still,
Baseball, we have not heard anything back from them, and football is working on their lease for their property before they make their
okay,
request.
okay.
And I believe I've seen work going on out at softball, and I know soccer has had some of the stuff in the process. Okay, economic development updates, Mayor?
Several things. You've seen that the National Fitness Campaign, Pryor Creek Fitness Court, will be launched at the Rec Center this coming Friday at 11 a.m. There'll be a lot of folks there, and supposedly I heard that we were trying to get a competition between the fire guys and the police guys, which might bring some hilarity to the event. Anyway, I also heard that somebody from the police, a lady, I'm not going to call out her name, but one of the female officers who's in really, really good condition and good shape, she was the first one that stepped up and said, yes, I want to do that. But we haven't got any of the fire guys who wanted to compete yet, so we're trying to encourage that. That's Friday at 11 o'clock. The Meadows at Stonegate development is moving forward with excavation, with drainage work. That developer's name is D.R. Horton, and that is moving forward. The EFE Access Group is continuing for doing the planning and design on the gathering space and grocery store / retail space. That's going to be across that's between Rowe and Kauai, and it's also on Graham Avenue. And I expect that there will be an official announcement sometime before the end of the year, so that's pretty exciting. That's a project that we've been working on for 2.5 years, and it's neat to be able to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. The Emergency Center Library Expansion Project is on the downhill run, and we should be ready for occupation sometime in November, fingers crossed, and that's kind of what we're shooting for. Jared and I continue to meet with developers with plans to build in Pryor. Mid-American Industrial Park is continuing with the apartment complex, moving forward with that, and I assume that they will go ahead and continue with their single-family dwelling annexation component out there. That is by an MOU that was done a few years ago, and so they're continuing to be active. There are other builders and developers who are wanting to be active in Pryor and continuing to have meetings with us. That's about all I have for now.
Okay.
I'd be happy to field any questions that anybody might have.
Any questions for Mayor? Okay, Jared, do you have anything?
Actually, I do. Thank you, sir. I'll make it short and sweet, Fred, okay? No. 3 things. Number one, on the piggyback off of Mayor Lee's, we have a lot of infill going on in town. This is awesome, because I don't have to do any extensions. I got stuff already there, and it's cleaning up the town. It's pretty awesome to be a part of. Number 2, I don't know if you've heard, but we're gonna have an ice rink out at the district. We're partnering with Mid-American Industrial Park. It's gonna be a pretty cool thing. We got electric out there, now it's up on them. So that's gonna be pretty sweet. I think they're gonna open up Saturday after Black Friday, and then be open for, I don't know, till January, so.
Will you be the first skater?
No, but what I would like to do is if the police and fire want to have a hockey competition, I'd be more than willing to sit there and watch that while I'm in the Fat Toad, you know? But I'm just saying. And number 3, GRDA has hired a new economic development planner, and he would like to get in contact with, I've been in contact with him. He would like to set up a meeting with the chamber, with Main Street, with anybody here. Of course, we can't have a quorum unless, have to be on a Wednesdays, so I'm trying to get that set up. The only problem I have is my next 2 Wednesdays open are the 16th and the 23rd, so once I hear back from him, they will be gracious enough to provide lunch. So it'll probably be at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday sometime. I'll keep you guys in the loop, shoot you an email when that time comes. They want to know the challenges we're facing, help us out with any planning, and so on and so forth. So once I get that firmed up, I'll let everybody know, send out an email.
Very good.
And number 4, I lied. One of the nicest ladies at GRDA is going to retire end of this year, Mrs. Townsend. I don't know if you guys heard this or not. She's retiring into this year, so she's got big shoes to, or she's going to have, Shannon's going to be taking her role. She'll be coming around introducing her to everybody. She will be able to handle Laura's position, but it's going to take her some time to get ramped up, so just be patient. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Any unforeseeable business? Okay, if not, motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second,
Second.
Starla, if you do the roll.
Moore,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Rodoff,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Dirk.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned. I think this might be our fastest.